Timothy C. Goodwin, welcome to Writers in Relationship.
Hello, Gail. Thanks for having me.
So we meet again
So we meet again. This is exciting. I'm so
on
happy.
on the heels of theater camp. Here we are. Um, and
Yeah,
go, yeah, go.
no, I just think it was so nice to meet you in person, and it was just yeah, it's great. You never really realize what someone's like until you meet the person because we've just been zoomed to death over the past 6, 7 years or whatever like that. So when I met you, the first thing I said was, "Oh, tall." Like it's just so weird when you meet somebody.
I had a student in a writing student when I was teaching at the college, and I had her for the entire semester, and it was one of those classes where everyone was very bonded, and we all got close and cried at the end. And she was selling homemade wreaths, and so I bought a wreath from her, and I came, and she was tiny, and I was astonished. I'm like, "Oh my God, you're short!" And she just cracked up, just like, "Yeah, I'm short. You're tall." Like it was the
Yeah, it's
disembodied
so
disembodied relationships that
yeah,
we have.
exactly.
Right. Yeah. I
Yeah, it's
always
exactly, and I'm sure you were surprised. Oh,
go,
oh,
go,
sorry.
go.
Oh no, I was just gonna make the joke. I just feel like hey, you must have been surprised that the lower half of my body is a horse, like whatever they call those. What are those
I was,
called? I can't remember.
and is it a centaur?
That's it. The joke's always better if you know the terms that you're trying
Oh,
to
I
use.
know, I know. Next time. I always start with the origin stories to just fill people in. Oh, and this is I always forget to say this is a joint production with Hotchpotch Literature and Arts um Substack as well as Writers in Relationship. But tell people who are listening how you and I know one another.
Well, I think we first met in the Smoke Long March micro marathon. I always forget the third word. It's marathon or madness, but I think that's wrong. Marathon. But we met at a Smoke Long workshop, and you were very kind. You reached out to me to see if I wanted to write something for the 2025 issue of Hodgepodge. And I couldn't believe it. Like I've never had someone reach out to me be like, "Hey, you want to write a story for us?" They're usually reaching out to me with, restraining orders or something like that. So it was very, very, very nice. And then from there, we developed that relationship, and then meeting again at the theater camp for writers, which was such an incredible time with Chris Tebbets and everybody up in like I guess I don't know, northeast Pennsylvania, central eastern Pennsylvania, somewhere in Pennsylvania.
Somewhere in
The
the
GPS
corner.
lost me.
Yeah, in the little
Yeah,
corner of New York, right. Yeah.
yeah.
And it's so unusual that I get to meet my writer friends live. So tell a little bit, just talk a little bit about that experience. It was really sweet. I mean, it was just such a
It's
beautiful
really
time. But just talk about, what was your experience with that? And Chris is an old friend of mine, and it's the second time I've done it, but I'm curious how you found it.
well, writing is such a solitary act, like a lot of art, I'm sure there aren't a lot of painters out there doing teams, but you just sort of meet people through, like we were just talking about Zoom and sort of these online communities that you start building through social media. And I know a lot of folks who have just developed such a wonderful circle of friends and colleagues and fellow writers through things like Blue Sky or Instagram or some of the old sites that we used to use. Heck, I'm sure some of them were doing them during the Friendster days, but um, when we were doing the theater camp for writers, I think I tend to be a little bit. I have another life as an actor, but and people are always surprised when I talk about having a little bit of social anxiety. I don't like going into new places, but it's because as an actor, you're up on the stage and that's your job, and someone is paid to come and see you, and that's very different to me than sort of saying, "Hi, I'm here in person with a bunch of people live and we're all going to read our work together." And then after that, after you read somebody's work out loud with them, you say, I don't know if sentence two works. And that's very, very, very nerve wracking. And it just sort of feels like it's a product of this time and our obsession with social media and how social media has taken over. And of course, how online communities grew because of COVID and stuff. Because back in the day, isn't that what everybody did? Don't they all have those romanticized ideas of like, like Hemingway and Mark Twain would just go and get drinks together and, they'd call their friend Edgar Allan Poe or, Mary Shelley or something. They all did these salons and stuff like that. And it was like such an everyday part of life for them. Now it's like, hey, I'm in Michigan. I visit some place, and one of the writers that I've met online is like, "Hey, I live there too. We should get coffee." And I'm like, "Are you insane? Why would I do that? I don't need you to find out what an idiot I am. I can't. No, no." But Theater Camp for Writers was really broke that down, and it was such a great experience because everybody there was just so supportive and so giving with their criticisms or critiques or what they had to say about things. Nobody really was trying to detract. Everybody sort of, it felt like everybody saw what we were trying, what the writer was trying to do, and was trying to support that. And that's the kind of thing that I'd love to do more of, maybe over coffee, if I can get over the social anxiety of actually going to do it with someone.
It's interesting what you just said, and I haven't thought about it in exactly this way, but the advent of social media, I think, has highlighted or increased or intensified our collective social anxiety, right? It's kind
Yeah,
of like we were forced to just get out there and do it in the past because it was the only option,
yeah,
right? And now it's not the only option. We can hide at home and be on our screens and do our whole lives like that if we really
sure.
want to, right?
Yeah, we could we could spiral into so many things that are wrong with today's society about how social media and the internet has ruined things. But it reminds me of how technology just sort of like creates this buffer zone, this buffer comfort zone. Because I remember, I think it was a joke that Seinfeld had once where he's like, you ever try to call somebody hoping that you're going to get their answering machine because you don't want to talk to them, but then they pick up and then you have to like have the actual conversation with them. So yeah, it feels like social media sort of helps us organize our time. Oh, I can talk to them when I want to talk to them. And I really think that that's sort of it. Just we continue to detach ourselves from the experience of going out and just talking to people. And I always get caught in the, oh, I don't wanna. What are you, crazy? I'm 52. I don't want to go to a bar to talk to somebody. The music's going to be loud and I don't even know this person very well. And then when I'm walking home from it, I'm like, I got to do that again. Who else do I not really know? Who else? Where are my friends? I get caught in that all the time.
I want to go back to something you said about because people also think, oh, writers are very introverted and we're antisocial and we're lonely and all these sort of stereotypes. You're an actor and a writer. And it's funny, I have a theater
Uh,
background as well. So we have some of that in common. And I'm wondering, how does your acting life and your in-person, live, vibrant, relationship centered work feed your writing? Or how is there an interplay between the two? Maybe that's an even better question.
um, yeah, it's really funny. I graduated in writing from the University of New Orleans last century. And after I graduated, I sort of did this weird trick to myself where I said, okay, well, I have a degree in writing now, a bachelor's degree in writing. So that must mean I'm good at it, right? And so that kind of unfortunately put 15 years of me not being able to look at a page and do any serious writing because I was afraid that I had to live up to this expectation that I made for myself. It was really, really frustrating. And in that interim, I discovered acting. I was working at a record store, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to try and learn something new every summer to try and feel like I was, smart still. I don't know. This is like the year 2000. So the first summer that I tried to learn something new, it was skateboarding. That did not go well. Did not. And the second summer, I I answered an ad for a show in Rochester, New York. It was Comedy of Errors by a community Shakespeare company. And so I played the spear holder and I just fell in love with it. It was very great. And I was very, very fortunate to meet a lot of people in that community. Again, meeting people person to person who just introduced me to other folks. And I just sort of ended up becoming an actor. And within that sphere, I was doing a lot of improv work. And that's where I feel like the unintended consequence of all of that improv stuff helps my writing a lot, a ton. And I was pretty deep into it. There are a lot of really great artists. The folks that taught us how to do improv, the workshops that I first started taking, they were at Jiva Theater in Rochester, New York, and they were run by a group called Dad's Garage that was out of Atlanta, Georgia, run by the then artistic director, Sean Daniels. And it was based in something they sort of had two different ways of looking at it. There's a gag improv and a narrative improv. The narrative improv comes from a guy named Keith Johnstone. I am throwing so much out there. But this guy, Keith Johnstone, is a Canadian who discussed narrative improv, which was sort of more of a story based improvisational theater than the sort of stuff you see on, I think everybody has the familiarity with Whose Line Is It Anyway? So with that narrative idea of the beginning, middle, and end, it really encouraged the story building aspect. Now, I want to be very clear. I say all this stuff like we were creating like Chekhov or doing some kind of like Toni Morrison-esque, beautiful storytelling. No, it was the same stuff you see in all of improv, which was like, Wolverine and Abraham Lincoln, fight off a Martian invasion kind of stuff. But it really sort of based that kind of idea of like what happens next, what could happen next, what can happen next. And that's something that I feel very, very thankful for that I have gotten in my writing, which is this exploration of what's happening in the piece. That's both good and bad. Um, so I really attribute that idea of being able to yes and to use another overused stereotype of improv the stories that I write to try and see what happens. And another really important thing in that vein was I was very, very lucky to, I was doing some music writing back around the turn of the century. And I got to interview the guitar player Vernon Reid from my favorite band, Living Colour. And he was a very, very big improvisational jazz guitarist before he became um, got into this band Living Colour or started the band Living Colour. And he told me while he was on the phone that improv is like going down an alleyway. You can't see the end, but it looks like it's a dead end at the end of that alley. But it's not until you go down there that you find that there's another alley that breaks off to the left or a ladder that goes up on the right. It's not until you go down the alley. And I've always, always, always gone back to that. And that really, really helps me in my own writing. And the only other thing that I'll say about it was I was doing all of this acting and getting all of the rejection that you usually get from acting. You go to auditions, you go to auditions, you go to auditions. And then a friend of mine who was also a writer introduced me to Submittable, which is I didn't know existed. And this is like 2019. And I finally started to like say, well, let me try and get back into writing. And so I told him, I was like, well, great. I'm going to try and start submitting some things as well. He's like, all right, let me get this straight. So you're an actor and a writer now. So were you not getting enough rejection from acting? Is that the thing?
How do you handle that rejection? I mean, that's a relationship thing. I know. I mean, like
I
I'm not
I buy
asking
a
myself that. I barely submit anymore, and I don't know if it's because of that or because of laziness or because of how just much of a bummer it is.
I buy a lot of Kleenex.
Have you
But I
learned? I
mean,
mean, people
I
say
mean, I,
don't take it personally. Have you learned how to not take it personally? Like, what does that even mean?
one of the trick, I was really, I feel like anybody that knows me kind of gets to be. I was obsessed with literary magazine that's out there. It's called Had. I think it's my favorite lit mag. It was one of the first ones that I ever found when I started writing again. And there's such beautiful condensed pieces on that site, and I became obsessed with it. And I became obsessed with it in the way that I thought it was like, I wanted to sit at the cool kids table. And I got pretty like, I think I really overdid it, that it was another validation. Yeah, I wasn't validated as a writer unless I could get into this one place that I really, really, really liked. And so I would spend, it would really affect me. If you read the Aaron Birch, who is the editor in chief, is very serious, of course, about the work, but is also sort of like, look, we're doing these calls and they're, we're having fun. I think the actual masthead says we might have had a few beers. It's just a very loosey goosey, wonderful place. But the writing that's on there just is so inspiring. But I would take it really serious. I'd be like, I knew it. I'm just not a good writer. They've rejected me again, again. And when I finally had a piece accepted by them, it was from a guest editor. So my partner Jen, who had been putting up with a couple of years of me being like, I'm just no good. I can't get in it. I called her and I was like, I got in. I got a piece that was accepted. I was at an airport in, I can't even remember where I was. And I got the news and I called her immediately. It was like, I got accepted. I got a piece in Had. She's like, oh my God, thank you so much. She was so excited. She was so excited. And then I said, but it wasn't from the editor in chief, it was from a guest editor. And I could almost feel her hand coming through her phone, up into the satellite, down to the other satellite, and coming through my phone to wring my neck, like, just that. So the rejection, I've gotten better. The trick that I do for rejections now that I've kind of like gotten as I've become older, which means 6 months older because that just happens. Um, whenever I get the rejection, I just immediately shoot it into a folder and then go to my own spreadsheet that I have of where my works are and where I'm submitting to. Write declined on it and the date that it was declined, and then just so I can get away from it. Um, yeah, I've stopped with the dart boards, with the pictures of the editors and chiefs that didn't. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, that's it. I just try and get it out of the inbox and then forget about it and move on to the next one.
Yeah, here's another question, kind of in that same category of I was reading a piece about comparison among writers, and your friend gets some award or somebody gets an agent, or like, how do you manage that among people? Because I mean, I've had mixed success. I mean, I think having had a novel that was published, and for me it did well. I mean, it didn't sell great, but I felt good about the process, and I've had a few books now. I think it's easier for me to just be happy for people, but I do get jealous sometimes, and I
Yeah,
sometimes don't know
yeah.
like how to work that in a relationship where I'm trying to be supportive and I'm also kind of feeling like, oh, but I want some of that too. I went to a friend's book launch, and it's so stupid. I'm gonna admit this. So she had like 40 people at her launch, and what I was like, my launch, there were only like 10 people. What's wrong with me? like, what?
Yeah. It's
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, there are folks that I met through the Smoke Long workshops and online and social media, and there is serious FOMO. Um, and I think that I've finally achieved a sort of place where instead of being jealous of them, it's like it inspires me to go and just, I can do that too. I can do that too. And the only thing that I have to try and watch out for there is, oh my gosh, I saw this person. Now they've got something that's in this literary magazine. Let me read it. Oh, that's kind of in the vein that I write. I should just send something to them. And the danger for me in that respect is just sending out stuff that I don't really feel is ready, which is also something new for me. I was so like, I just need to get published. I need to be validated that this is worth it. I do believe that I've let stuff out of the out of out of my inbox, out of the outbox. I've sent stuff out that wasn't ready, I think, that really didn't feel, but I was like, I just got to get this out there. I just want to see if I'm good. And so I think it's nice for me because I definitely feel that, where I'm just like, oh my gosh, where is this person finding the time to write all of this stuff? Like, I'm an out of work actor. I should have all the time, and I don't have any time. And this person's just published 3 things in the past month. And then it just sort of makes me like, all right, let's, I make this joke a lot. I'm a recovering NASCAR addict, and I used to love NASCAR for reasons we can talk about at the next interview. But there was this idea in NASCAR that you got to run your own race, you know. There are, just to try and to explain that a little bit, you're out there with 40 some odd other drivers, and we're all trying to win the race, of course, but you got to remember that you're doing your own thing. Your car is your own car. You've made the adjustments that you've made. You got to work on that and not worry about what everybody else is doing. And so that's been a thing that I really go back to a lot. Um, that and a love of moonshine that NASCAR gave me. So those 2 things I go back to a lot with
It's a good dual strategy.
NASCAR. Yeah,
But I like that a lot because if we compare ourselves to where we were 6 months ago, 6 years ago, like
yeah,
then we have an accurate picture of like our development and where we
yeah,
are in relationship to maybe where we want to be next. Right.
yeah, exactly. And that's something to also remember too. It's a hard balance for me because I still don't have a very good read on my work when something is finished. Like I was just talking about trying to let something out the door when you feel it's right. There are things that I've felt right that I've given to beta readers, and they just sort of hit me back and like, what are you doing? I don't even know what you're talking about. I'm like, oh, I forgot. I was supposed to leave that detail in there yeah, So it's trying to find that balance of knowing that something is good and doing something for yourself, but also, yeah, sorry, I sort of drifted off into my own head of anxiety over it, and now I can't remember what I was gonna
It's
say.
totally fine. It's totally fine. I'm gonna
Yeah,
to turn the ship a little bit and just tell us a little bit about
yeah.
your piece in Hodgepodge 5.1 is just so delightful. So maybe just tell us a little bit about it and how you got the inspiration from that piece of art, how that kind of came about.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. This issue's art is done by Emma Tumanian, I believe is how I would say the last name. And scrolling through all the pieces of art, I think I actually picked a different piece of art and then kind of found the one that I picked, and I was just like, wait, this is it. This is the one that I want. And for some reason, um, to sort of explain the piece or the picture, it just looked like a face that was bisected into 2 different faces, and it just sort of made me remember that there was sort of this little fad, as things on in the internet go, that they last they don't last very long. But I just remember this time when people were asking on social media if you would sleep with your doppelganger, and I immediately was just like, yeah. I mean, that's the answer to the question. I was like, of course, of course, of course. But then, the idea that it sort of just kind of started to kind of circle in my head, and this idea that I've always struggled with as myself of trying to be the best version of myself. And what would that be like? I'm always too afraid to sit down and do the piece. I'm always too afraid to go to the bar and to meet the other people. I feel like sometimes feel like I'm the stereotypical Gen Xer, in that I sometimes feel like a huge slacker, like I haven't achieved. You know what I mean? And so I was starting to wonder what it would be like if it would just be this kind of thing where, if you slept with your doppelganger, you incorporated, they were the best version of you, and you would just sort of see what that was like. And I just wanted to try and create a world, which is a difficult balance, and I don't really know if I hit it. I'm not a very big fan of hard sci-fi. So I know that there are folks out there, and they can do it. If that's what they enjoy doing, but people that sort of tell you why, like the Starship Enterprise couldn't fly in an atmosphere, or how a phaser wouldn't really work, or why do all the alien species speak English? All these kind of things. I'm a very sort of soft sci-fi guy, so I think I just wanted to try and create a world where it was just a given. Everybody was sleeping with their doppelganger. Nobody knew why. And so that idea was really taking hold. And I think we were talking about the theatrical background that you and I have been that I have you and I have, and dialogue is such a huge thing for me, and I love it, and I love dialogue so much. And I don't really write a ton of dialogue when I'm working in microfiction, which is what I do primarily. So kind of having the room to sort of create these characters through dialogue was was a challenge that I feel like very proud of. And one of the other things that influenced that, I'm a huge fan of the Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright kind of Cornetto trilogy, if you're familiar with it. Shaun of the Dead, the movies Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and The World's End. And it's a very fast-paced dialogue and really, really witty. And so I watched The World's End as well, and like I want to steal some of this dialogue. I want to steal that rapid fire thing going on. So all of that kind of got thrown into a pot with a little bit of weirdness. I'm a huge Twin Peaks David Lynch fan, and I think there's one thing in particular that I think of. It just the narrator's partner has her doppelganger always at home, and I just love this idea that they were always sort of just becoming one person in this weird way. So it was a lot of fun to do, and it's also one of those things where I could have worked on it forever. I feel like I could have worked on it forever. I was at the time I was trying to do revisions and stuff. I was on an acting contract in Michigan, in the Detroit area, so I didn't get to it as much. And I'm just like, what I so it's definitely one of those pieces where it's just like, ooh, if I could have had like 10 more years with that.
I just want to tell it was I remember I was doing the proofing because I proof before we do layout. We have one round of proofing then and we two rounds. But anyway, I was going through and I was sitting in my studio laughing by myself out loud. So funny. So funny. And obviously you're funny. I mean, right? You're funny.
Well, I mean, it's sometimes if I can make Jen laugh, that's all I need. That's
Yeah,
all.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
it.
So and it's because the piece that I wrote under a pen name this time, but I worked on a humorous piece and I've written comedy, I've written funny stuff before, but it's difficult. When I hit it, it feels well, but like how did you workshop or revise for humor in particular? Did you read out loud? Did you have somebody like how were you pointedly working on that aspect of because it's such a great story.
I
That's such an important, prominent part of what makes that story so delightful to read.
I think there are a couple things. When I'm working on a piece, I love to read stuff aloud. And a lot of that dialogue was stuff that I would just be sort of like, just talking out loud, trying to play both parts or three parts or however many parts were there, just to kind of make sure that it feels right. Because I think the danger, I was actually, um, um, it's actually really interesting. I was in a conversation interviewing the editor in chief of Had, that literary magazine that I was had such an unchilled love for, who was kind of we were talking about the fact that sometimes dialogue can be too expositional. And I could list a number of movies where I've watched that and I felt that. So for me, the real work is trying to make the dialogue push the action forward, but not make it expositional. And so that was what I worked on the most. Maybe to a fault of other things people might find wrong with that piece, might be able to be like, well, wait, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. Because I just didn't want it to feel like, well, gee, everyone's sleeping with their doppelganger because it appears that we all, just making it that way. And I think, you know, I think the amount of influences that I've had have always just been pointed towards comedy. In my acting life, I've done a zillion productions of a show called Sheer Madness, which is the sort of murder mystery. And we'll talk about that in our third interview after we talk about NASCAR. But the creator of that show, I was very lucky to work with him as the director for a bunch of the productions that I did. And it really taught me about the mathematics of comedy on stage. It's definitely it's such a math. And I am horrible at math with the numbers. Like, don't I can't. If we got to save the spaceship, and you're looking at me to try and plot the trajectory so that we don't crash into the other, it ain't gonna happen. It ain't gonna happen. We're gonna crash. But I really feel confident in. There was this sort of, I think, it's weird because I don't want to give myself credit for being funny. It's just I'm one of those people that's like, you're a product of the environment. I grew up on a zillion sitcoms. My family, we used to eat dinner in front of the television. You know, I just dinner time meant World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, and then so many sitcoms. Naming everything that I could possibly think of, like Good Times, What's Happening, 227, and then shows like MacGyver or, all of these sitcoms that I've grown up with, and all of the sitcoms that I still love. There's the other different types of sitcoms. There's The Office, the British one that I loved, Garth Marenghi's Dark Place. I think all of these, in a childhood and an upbringing up until today, seeing the different ways that comedy works, you have this raw material to work with. And that's why I always feel like it's very nice if somebody tells me I'm funny, but I would just sort of reply with, yeah, it's because I watched a ton of television and watched how jokes work and learned that timing and remembered the timing. Bugs Bunny does something, but he does something at a very specific moment after something else happens so that a joke works. And so I feel very, very lucky that I had that childhood and I got to watch as much television as I have and still do, then had all that raw material taken by Bruce Jordan, who created Sheer Madness and got to work with me over the course of like 15 years in different productions to say, well, the reason that joke didn't work, you have to stand here, plant, say the line, then move. Like all of this, the math of it, the beats, the timing. And I think that just sort of naturally translates into writing it as well. You have to, it has to be paced right for something to land. And I love it. I love it so much. It's hard. I'm never more grumpy than when I'm writing comedy, but if it makes somebody laugh, then I guess it's worth it.
It's what you're saying is so true. The precision of it is so demanding. And I think that's the same thing that makes it so gratifying when you nail it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
I mean, the piece I worked on with Pam Tournier, who's one of our editors, and she's also part of Smoke Long. And she put me through my paces for this. I've never worked so hard on a story, and because she just was unflinchingly demanding about that precision, about the humor. So but then
Yeah.
I read your story and I'm like, oh yeah, he's nailed it. Like the precision is there in that story, the doppelganger story.
Yeah.
It's great.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you very much.
it
Thank
was
you.
just a delight, just a delight. And it was a great concept, and then it was so well realized. I really just was very, very excited and very happy to have it be part of
Thank you. It's all it's all Emma Tumanyan's fault for having
Blame
such a
Emma.
beautiful picture
Blame
for me to.
Emma. Um, just to wrap up, because we're nearing the end of the 40 minutes, but if you had a piece of advice, because most of the people who are listening are also writers, what would you say to people who are listening as advice?
Man, I'm the first person that needs the advice. I really think I go back to that NASCAR saying a lot that, you know, you got to run your own race because, one of the things that we talk about in improv is that a lot of people are afraid to do improv because they think that they're not funny, and that's not the point. They don't think that they have they think that their life is boring and won't be interesting. And every single person out there is different. I know that's such a cliche and it's so weird, but you just got to tune into that stuff. You got to listen to the voice in your head that's like, this is what I like. This is what I like to do. This is what I think the path that I've got to go on. And sometimes those paths and the directions that you take are are a little bit weird, and they should be weird, and they should be a little bit scary because they might be in a territory that you don't really usually like to do. But I think it's worth just remembering that you got to run your own race, run your own race, forget about everybody else, and do what it is that kind of sings to you both in your heart and in your head. Boy, that almost sounded smart.
It's great. Yeah, I had an editing client, and her point of she wrote a book, and the tagline was "Keep your eye on the ball, and the ball is you."
Huh.
It's a
I feel like
ver-
I want to change my answer. No, I'm
it's a
just kidding.
version. It's a version of what you're saying. Um,
Yeah, that's
so
great.
so I had asked you when we were not live, are you working on, what are you working on? Are you working on a book? To just tell us a little bit about what's next creatively for your writing, just so we have something to look forward to.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm actually seriously working on a revision of a book that I wrote, and I did this maybe 2 years ago um, for the NaNoWriMo, the novel writing November thing, and I didn't do it as part of NaNoWriMo because I wanted to give myself the excuse if I didn't do it in a month, I didn't feel bad. So I did end up with something that's about 50,000 words, and then much like what happened when I graduated, I was scared to look at it and I didn't reread it for about another year and a half because I was afraid of seeing how much work that I would have to do on it. But now I've been, you know, kind of making myself adhere to a schedule, trying to write a little bit every day, and hopefully that's it. I can keep doing that. We'll see. We'll see.
Is it a novel, I'm assuming? Yeah.
Yes, yes. I'm a very big fan of all those old school noir films. So I just kind of wanted to see if I could write one of my own. That's sort of, I think the Hodgepodge piece with Doppelganger was a very nice sort of warm up because it was like, okay, this I could do something. It would give me a little boost of confidence to feel like I could do something like that. So um, more working on a lot of dialogue and more working on a lot of dialogue that I hope will be funny.
I'm very excited. If you need a beta reader, let me know.
Thank you, thank you. You don't you be worried. Don't be, watch out what you wish for.
Yes.